coming up, and I'm honored to get ready to interview and have a great discussion with our first panel. And this panel is focused on entrepreneurship. And so if you're someone who's interested in possibly leading a business, creating a business, or let's say that's not my jazz, Donnie, but I want to be successful in business. These guys are going to give you tips. They're going to give you advice. They're going to be able to talk about experiences they have lived, both positive and some of the challenges out there, to set you up to be in a position to be successful in life. You know, part of when we recruit folks to join the fraternity, and we have that conversation, we pitch them on the fact that you're going to get experience of being around alumni who've been successful. You're going to get to learn some of these life lessons that give you an advantage versus that person who didn't join a fraternity or didn't join the greatest fraternity on the planet. And luckily, we have some phenomenal people to talk about that today. So first, I want to bring in and welcome Frater Brad Bohannon, who's from the Delta Lambda chapter at Central Missouri. Talk a little bit about Brad Bohannon. He owns several bars in New Orleans. First, Spirits on Bourbon. I'm sure a number of you have attended his facility there during Conclave. Turtle Bay on Decatur, Tavern on Vets. He also has a passion, is involved in the music industry. He's part of Bohannon Heibner Publishing, which has published songs for award-winning country music artists Craig Morgan, Tracy Lawrence, and Colt Ford. If you see his face here and you think, I've seen that face somewhere before, and it wasn't just at his facility down there in New Orleans, he also has been a part of Bar Rescue and has a great relationship with John Taffer. And actually, John Taffer came in and helped to rescue his bar, and it's been phenomenally successful since. So, Frater Brad, welcome in.
Oh, yeah.
Second panelist is Frater Eric Plow, who was initiated into the Epsilon Omicron chapter at the University of Houston and serves on the Grand Council as an at-large member. Professionally, he has served as senior managing consultant at IBM Corporation and currently a partner and managing director for Benjamin Johnson Design LLC, entire interior design company. Additionally, he has started and been a part of other successful startups, which we'll talk about a little bit with him. Welcome, Frater Eric.
Thank you.
Third, Frater Dave Bohline, who is from the Beta Sigma chapter at the University of Southern California. He was a member of the Grand Council as Grand Hypophetes from 2013 to 2015. He became a member of TEAC's Foundation Board of Directors in 2018 and currently serves as the Vice Chairman of External Affairs. Professionally, Frater Bohline is the Chief Operating Officer and co-founder at Apollo Interactive. And if you're thinking, hey, there's a TEAC connection, Apollo, to his company name, you're darn right there is. And that's also, he's partnered with some other TEACs to create that organization, which is a performance marketing agency. Frater Dave Bohline, good to see you, sir.
Good to be here. Thanks, Donnie.
And last, but certainly not least, Frater Bob Nardelli, who was initiated the Zeta Theta chapter at Western Illinois University. He's currently the founder and CEO of XLR-8 LLC, which is an investment and advisory company. He has grown the sales and profits at a number of multinational corporations. Some of them you might have heard of as we get going down the list here. After beginning his career at GE in 1971, he has since served as CEO of Cerberus Operations Advisory Company, as chairman, CEO, and board of managers as a member of Chrysler, and also chairman and president of and CEO of a company you might have heard of called Home Depot. Frater Bob Nardelli, thank you for making time for us today.
Thank you, Don. Great to be here.
All right. So with this phenomenal panel, we're going to keep it quick hitting. We're going to keep it moving and tap in to the experiences that you've had. I want to start with you, Dave. When you think about the spirit of being a builder, when you think about the spirit of creating an organization, creating a team, creating a business, when did that spirit, when did that aspect come into your life? Is that something that was natural? Is that something that you acquired throughout time? When did that start to hit you? I want to be someone who's a builder. I want to be someone who's a multiplier.
You know, I don't know if it came naturally. It might have, but I didn't realize it. But where I found out that I wanted to do that was in college, and specifically when I was in TEAC, and specifically when I wanted to, you know, create a much better chapter, a much better TEAC than I was a part of. So I understood that if you believe in something, if you want to do something and you can imagine it, it may take a while, but you can actually make it happen.
Bob, I'm curious for you, being involved in so many companies, and I know you've many times been brought in as the CEO to help take the company to another level, times where you've been brought in, the company's not performed at the place they wanted it to. So sometimes you've taken over winning teams, and other times you've taken over teams where you got to rebuild that team. Where does that spirit come, that focus driven, you know, I'm going to make it happen attitude?
Well, again, I've been very, very fortunate over the years, Johnny. I would say it goes back, certainly, I think everybody's family has had an influence on them. And, you know, my parents lived through the Depression. My dad served World War II. So he brought a lot of that culture and environment to me. I played sports, starting in grade school, high school. I played collegiate sports, played football, and learned the importance of team, learned the importance of dependency on one another, that each and every person is going to count on you to do their jobs. And then I found that my most successful experiences in business have been when we built a strong team, culturally bonded, sharing a vision, having purpose, and working together, finding more reasons on how to versus why not. And that's been a wonderful experience for me and for many of the colleagues I've had the privilege of working with.
Well, that's a critical message right there, Bob. What you ended with there. There are every opportunity in life you can choose to focus on how we're going to make this happen and being creative, or focus on all the challenges that are before you. You get to choose where you want to put that energy and that focus, and where focus goes, energy flows. So I love you touching on that. Brad, I want to bring you in. Got a little head start from the podcast. We're going to keep pumping this podcast, get more and more folks tuned into it. We had a great conversation about when you were in college at Central Missouri and how you really tapped into utilizing the resources of your chapter, your alumni, and the broad experience of Tall Cap Epsilon. Can you touch on that again? How, if I'm out there and I'm a collegiate member, how I can take advantage of those 4 or 5 years that I'm in college to use this free resource, which is Tall Cap Epsilon, to grow my entrepreneurial skills?
Well, I went there and I realized that I came from a low to middle class family. And if I wanted to be an entrepreneur, I couldn't afford to make some of these mistakes that someone that had the resources that I didn't have. So they had a lot more wiggle room. So I used the fraternity doing stuff with philanthropy and learning how to manipulate people to help with your cause, and learning those little functions as a student has brought me great success, and it taught me how to work with my employees and to work with people on the same level.
Eric, talk a little bit about your experience at the University of Houston. How, and I know you're in leadership positions, you attended the Leadership Academy. How did those experiences aid you as someone who's now started multiple companies? I know right now you got a very successful design company. As we spoke last week, right? You got more business than you know what to do with right now, which is always a great thing in life.
Absolutely.
How did some of those skills you gained during that time, how you're still putting them to work today?
Yeah, some of it's been touched on already. I think there's 2 things. One, you have to be able to sell your ideas. And even in the chapter, part of my job in leadership roles, whether it was as Rush Chairman or as Preakness or the other roles I served in, was really being able to build enthusiasm and excitement for the ideas I had and where we wanted to take the chapter. And those skills that I learned, trying to build motivation, build teamwork, build camaraderie around these ideas and our goals have continued to serve me up to today. It's still the same work that I do every single day. And as an undergraduate, it was a really great opportunity to practice in a safe environment. Some ideas were great, some ideas worked, some didn't, but really it was all about selling them and getting people behind you and motivated to achieve them.
When we talk about taking risks, Dave, what's the biggest risk that you feel you have ever taken? Was it the founding of your company? Was it a project you possibly got into? Was it a contract you entered into, a partnership? What's the biggest risk you've ever taken in being an entrepreneur?
So surprisingly, it's not starting the company. That was easy because it was kind of done on a whim. But once the company was going, we wanted to expand. And we just pretty much said, let's open up an office somewhere else. And without really thinking much about it, we chose to open up an office in Dallas, Texas. And I literally flew out there the next week with one of my partners. And we started from scratch. We didn't have an office. We didn't have a place to stay. We stayed in a motel for a while, then a hotel. Then we actually rented a place. And that was the biggest risk, because we just kind of trusted that if we worked hard enough, we'd make it happen. And we did.
How many times, how many days did you have to have self-talk? Because many times I bring the 4 of you on, and obviously you found tremendous success. And I think there can be folks who look at this panel and say, well, they must have just hit the lottery and they fell into it. And so when you start to tell these stories, I think it's critical how many times you had to have that self-talk of telling yourself, this is going to work. we're going to find the idea, we're going to find the resources, we're going to do whatever we need to do. How many times that had to happen over and over again to create what we see today?
All the time. You have to constantly be thinking about it and constantly talk about it. That is pretty much the buzz going on at my company, or when we did this. It's just how we're going to make it work. And you kind of reinforce each other by saying, yeah, we're going to do this, aren't we? Yeah, we are.
And Bob, how important is that as a CEO of many companies, especially large companies where there's all sorts of levels of managers and directors and board members? How important is that as the leader of the group to continue to give that inspiration and continue to have that battle plan of here's what we're going to do, here's how we're going to chart success?
Yeah, it's critically important. But I want to dispel this silver spoon thing. I wasn't fortunate enough to get a scholarship to college and basically peeled potatoes in the afternoon, so forth. My first job was at General Electric, and I was making $9,700. And when I go to some of these MBA programs, they say a week, and I say no, a year. So I moved 13 times with my family, and the big risk was going into field that I knew nothing about, new business segments, new technologies. But I knew that I need to broaden my base. I needed to have the broadest base of experience to be able to be successful and then be able to lead large multinational complex organizations. So when I went from running GE Transportation, Power Systems, I didn't have the level of technology that I had to learn. But that's what has to happen. You have to be a dry sponge, immerse yourself in a bucket, and learn as fast as you can so that you don't pace the performance of the company. And our strategy was very simple: enhance the core, extend the business, and expand the markets. And we were able to double revenue and income, both at GE and Home Depot at the same time.
So I want to go around the horn here with this question, and I know there's probably a million things you could pull from. So I'm grateful for whatever message you can share here with the folks who are tuned in. Brad, I'm going to start with you. What's the best advice that you have ever received? And if you're one of the other three panelists, obviously you know what's coming. So what's the best advice, Brad, that you have ever received?
The best advice as an entrepreneur, I've learned the difference between need and want. I think that's essential in everything that you purchase, everything you do. Do you need this or do you want this? And I do that in my personal life and my business life to let you know that the stuff that's important to you, that if it's going to make you, if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense as an entrepreneur. So you have to use those kind of things to figure out where to spend your money at, because especially as an entrepreneur, coming from here, when it's really the company's money, but you're the company. So you got to take it a little personally, and you have to use your money properly and wisely, because as a small entrepreneur, you can't make the mistakes that they can on the other ones as a big operation.
Well, I hope folks have their notebook out, because there's the first one right there. If it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense. I love that. Eric.
Yeah, so I think as leaders, sometimes we feel like the pressure to always have the best idea or to have all the answers is our responsibility. And the advice I was given was always, the best idea always wins. That's why we create a team. That's why we, don't let your ego get into it. Really let the best idea come to the surface from your team, and it helps build momentum and support for, where you're headed.
Well, I love that. At 4 o'clock, they're letting me close this thing down and have a big discussion about post-COVID. And I will tell you what, talking about ego, we're going to have a great discussion about ego. Dave, what's the best advice you've ever received?
Challenge the paradigm. Don't be trapped inside somebody else's reality. And that you can look at that from a fraternity perspective, because there's so many rules and so many classifications and rankings and categories that are placed upon us that you think are real and exist, but they really don't. You can bust out of them, you can break through just by thinking differently and refusing to follow inside the box the way that everybody tells you have to do things. In a company, it's a little bit more obvious, but who says that you need to raise money to start a company? Yes, sometimes you do, but other times you don't necessarily need to go through rounds of friends and family and a Series A and a Series B. Everybody loves to do that kind of thing now. But to me, we started our company with each of us threw in $300 a piece. I'm not joking. We just bootstrapped it the entire way. So when you believe that you can do something just because people say you can't, or the rules or the box, the paradigm that's being that was created tells you you can't, don't believe it.
Bob, I'm excited with your wealth of experience. What's the best advice you've ever received?
Well, a couple of, Jack Welch called me one day and said, quit sucking your thumb, feeling sorry for yourself. You know, people who do things make mistakes. They never make the biggest mistake of all, doing nothing. And then through that cultural immersion, you know, we always felt that there's an opportunity to improve upon everything you do. Continuous improvement, an insatiable appetite to listen, learn, and then lead is really what has served me well over the years.
So advice is one aspect. Another aspect is feedback. Those are two separate angles or two separate perspectives that you gain in being a leader and continuing to move an organization forward. Dave, how important is feedback to you? How active are you in seeking out feedback, and how critical is it to be open to feedback?
It's huge. And to me, I totally agree that the best ideas will eventually win. And the only way to find out what the best ideas are is essentially, and I'm arguing about them. And I love to argue in a good way, in a fun way, with my friends who happen to also be my partners and my people that I hire at my company. And every night I go out there and I argue about things. And I say, why are we doing things this way? Then they'll argue with me. It's, well, we're doing it this way because of that. And then they'll challenge me and I'll challenge them. And that's feedback in its best form. And there's no filters, and there's no political games, and there's no like, well, let me think about the right approach for telling you something. We just kind of have it out. And at the end, it's much more productive and efficient.
Yeah, no doubt that debate aspect is critical. And I think the other piece too is, and Dave, you can back me up on this. It's important that you're walking in and you don't take things personally, right? This is about what's best for the organization. And that's critical in being able to have that open, fervent debate, that you're able to understand everybody's in this for the same goal.
Very true. Very true.
Brad, feedback, how important is it? How do you, as someone who owns multiple bars, how are you seeking that feedback? What are some of the sources you go to make sure that your bars are doing the right things, that folks are having a great experience, and that the marketing out there is working, the word of mouth conversations are happening to continue to drive revenue?
The feedback for my kind of industry is a little bit trickier because it comes from like a personal level. And some of it's like the feedback from a customer is usually more generated to make them happier. So I have to be careful with that. I try not to take diet advice from fat people, and I don't take financial advice from broke people, I tell them. So, and I always tell them, like, man, when you open your bar, you ought to do this. But my feedback is with the numbers. I have numbers, I have goals that set on everything, every little piece of I always tell my managers, I go, if I sell this much in merchandise, I sell this much in food, this much here, and we have this kind of growth, you don't even see me. But until then, I start micromanaging. So that's the feedback I use. The feedback to me is the numbers and the dollars.
How important, Eric, is it, especially when you're in the design industry and you're in people's homes, right? And also you're in their businesses, but many times you're in their homes, their personal space, that whatever you do, they're going to see day in and day out, every day moving forward. How critical is it, the attention to detail, because of the fact that the word of mouth marketing and how important it is in your business?
Yeah, in the design and architecture business, my whole business is built on referrals. So it's very important at the end of the day, at the end of our projects, that our clients are very happy with the service and the product that they got. So that feedback, we seek to get it regularly and often throughout the process. We've actually built a process that's designed to obtain feedback all through the process, so that when it finally comes time to see the end result, there's no surprises at that point, and they've been brought along this journey along the way. So that's been very successful for us. On the other hand, with feedback, one of the things I struggle with a little bit is actually giving feedback to my team. A lot of times in a leadership position, you feel like you have to solve the problems, or, if somebody's not performing the way you'd hoped or you'd like, we step up and do things ourselves. And I think one of the things I've had to learn is giving that immediate feedback to my team members. And, again, like it was said previously, it's not personal, But we're all here to kind of further the goals of the organization. And as long as you're a part of the team, we have to be able to communicate openly and honestly. And that takes some work sometimes. It's not something that's easy for me.
Bob, I'm curious, when it comes to the large organizations you've been a part of, how are you able to distill feedback? I can only imagine that you're going to have managers or folks who might be yes men who want to tell you what you want to hear whenever you're asking for feedback from the field or about a new product launch or something that's going on out there in your industry. How are you able to distill that and also try to tie in folks who are going to give you it raw? They're going to give you the honest feedback that is going to put you in a position as the leader to put the company in the best position possible.
I would say a couple of things. In my experience, success breeds complacency and arrogance. And that's what I've seen time and again will put a company or a person in the ditch. Some of the little tricks that I've used in running Chrysler, for example, my team used to complain about consumer reports or what have you that, they really just didn't like us. So to break that, I made all the senior team come over to the customer complaint center and spend hours on the phone talking to customers on why they didn't like the car, why it wasn't performing, right? So that was really important. At Home Depot, I put in the Net Promoter Score. So we would do 1.8 billion transactions a year. That's the kind of feedback we would take, and we would take it to heart and not just miss a person that says you're out of stock, the product didn't work, you overpriced me. I think it's critically important that feedback from a customer or, Eric, like you say, a client or someone is really gold. It's really gold. You learn that with Six Sigma quality tables that, again, you listen, you learn, and that's how you can have continuous improvement in yourself, in your business, in the organization, and the team. As part of outlining the purpose of a company and what are the strategic objectives. We had 330,000 associates at Home Depot, so we had to continually communicate frequently, often, and succinctly and direct. Tremendous transparency.
We talked earlier a little bit about ego. I also want to talk a little bit about humility and vulnerability. That's been a big discussion throughout the RLC season over the last few weeks. And in that spirit, I want to have a discussion about your biggest flop, because everybody sees the success. But I know for me, for all of us, there have been times where we were all in on an idea or we were all in on a direction and we were wrong. We made a mistake, and owning that mistake. Can we share a story? Dave, I'll start with you. What's a flop you have had? What's a mistake you made? What's something you look back and say, in retrospect, 2020, right? I would have gone in a different direction.
Well, thanks for starting with me on the flop, Donnie. But I spearheaded us to get a new account for our agency, and that was Wingstop. And I was convinced that I had the perfect strategy and the advertising that needed to happen, digital communication that we're going to do. And we spent 6 months on it, and we put all kinds of resources into it. And a lot of people said they didn't really like what I was doing, or they had different ideas. And I pretty much said, well, that's fine, but we're going to go this direction. We actually ended up winning the account, but winning the account means that they hired us. And then as we rolled out the advertising, they hated it. And we just, for limbo, we wasted our time for 6 months or a year, really making no money off of it. So it was pretty much an egotistic big flop on my part that I spearheaded, drove, and thought that it was the most brilliant idea. And it turned out not to be.
Hey, happens to all of us. Brad, I'm interested. Down in New Orleans, what's the biggest flop you've had?
Probably my biggest flops is when I went in with partners when I didn't have full control. I went into a situation where it was with like almost family members where they still had 66% of the control, so they could kind of push you around even if it was making the wrong decision. I don't think I would ever go into another partnership unless I had main control over it now. That way, if it's a loser, it's on my back, and I can live with that. So I'd say that would probably be my biggest, is going into partners where I'm not a 51% profit.
Well, I love the learning lesson that came from that.
Yeah.
Bob?
Yeah, boy, we could fill the rest of the time here.
You and I both.
We grew Home Depot in the 5 years I was there from 40 billion to 90 billion. So we had a lot of momentum. We went from 0 to #1 in Mexico. We went from 0 to #1 in Canada. So with that wind in the sail, I said, well, we're going to China. And, we knew that the basic formula for Home Depot was, do it yourself. We went to China with that same arrogance of mentality. And over there, it's do it for me because labor is reasonably inexpensive. People didn't have a garage full of high-end power tools. They only bought a hammer to get through the job. So we went over there and worked our butts off. And finally, I had to throw the towel in and say, well, I screwed this one up. And we retreated. A bruise and a little bit of scar tissue, but lesson learned is, we'll see this, Donnie, with the conversion to EV vehicles, for example, right? There's 286 million vehicles on the road today, 11 and a half years old. And I don't care if a company wants to go to EV, you better make darn sure there's somebody out there that wants to buy that new technology, which was the mistake we made going to China. We totally missed the do-it-yourself to do-it-for-me concept.
There's a lot of great messages in there, Bob. I'll say I just finished a book by Jocko Willink, who is the most decorated Navy SEAL of all time in U.S. history. And in the book, he talks about leadership strategies. He's brought in many times as a consultant for major corporations, even small businesses. And he talks about this thought of when it is time to retreat, that there's an egotistical, but also an aspect of our culture of don't ever quit. And obviously, many times that is what has gotten all of you into the positions of success that you have found. But you also have to know when are you in a project or when are you going down a road that it is not going to be successful. Obviously, in the military, that could lead to further casualties if you keep pressing forward and you don't have a very good plan. As you mentioned here with the China expedition, right, going down that road, it was only going to drive further and further debt or further and further frustration amongst the team. So that is a critical aspect too of knowing when is it time to shift directions. Eric, interested on your end, especially someone who has, again, started a number of companies. Have any of those companies started to sprout up and you realize I should probably focus my energy in a different direction? Maybe the market share isn't what I hoped it'd be. Maybe we don't have the product exactly the way we need it or want it, and I should shift my energy somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. My story is similar to David's in that, early on you get nervous. If there's available time and energy in the company, you feel like you've got to find those customers and you got to go out and find that work. But there's a big difference between work that keeps you busy and work that's profitable. And so many times we've taken on less than ideal clients just for the sake of we felt like we had to, but then all of a sudden we found ourselves being very distracted with a lot of small clients. And then when that big fish did come in the door, we didn't necessarily have the resources to take them on. And, that would have made up the profitability of all those other small projects put together. So I think it's just really identifying who our customer was and then really going after that work and not necessarily going after everything that came in the door.
I have a big, bold question here for you, Brad. Are you more focused on your business or are you more focused on your competition? Because especially for, I think, young folks who start to get going, right, many times they're looking at the market and not necessarily looking as much about themselves. I'm interested, what is the balance for you when it comes to focusing on your business or focusing on your competitors, especially in a place like Bourbon Street, which is unbelievably competitive and folks are screaming and dancing and playing music if you've never been there before. They're doing everything they can to get you to come into their doors.
The one thing I have learned and it's been successful with is control what you can control. Because if you start worrying about the stuff you can't control, it affects the stuff that you can. So you worry about those four walls of what you are doing and everything seems to work out. I'm not opposed to looking to see what they're doing. And I call it stealing like an artist because everything, you see what someone else is doing and you try to make it better. I'm not opposed to doing that, but you really have to control your four walls. If you can control your home, you're going to be fine in this business.
Dave, in fairness, I gave you the first flop question, so let's flip it the other way and I'll go to you. What is a time where there was an idea that you thought might not be successful, but it turned out that it crushed it, right? Or a time when you took a risk and it completely paid off?
So we started off as an advertising agency. And just a real quick explanation for everybody, that's where you hire clients, big corporations, and they give you a budget, you spend the money on their behalf. What I figured out is that we could make more money and be more successful if we got rid of our clients and instead produce the actual digital product ourselves. And I don't want to get into the weeds on this, but it's a lead. We were generating leads for big insurance companies and then giving them back to them with their own money. Instead, we decided to generate leads on our own and then sell them on the open market to all the different insurance companies. And it was a huge, huge, huge success. It did a few things. It got rid of clients. And as I'm sure Eric will agree, when you are in a business in which you constantly have to depend on clients, they can be some of the most difficult and sporadic sources of revenue that you can ever imagine. It gave us complete control over what we were able to do creatively and strategically, instead of having to listen to marketing managers that we didn't think were, as talented as us. But the thing is that by collapsing that, the risk was, well, what if it doesn't work? And then we've pretty much given up all our clients. And if this marketplace falls apart, how are we going to get back and do it again? So it was a big risk, but it was a very big reward, and very happy we did it.
All this talk of leads, we can start pushing people towards watching Glengarry Glen Ross. They can have that experience of that movie talking about leads. I love it.
That's right.
Bob, mentors, someone even who's had all the life experience and all the success that you have. Do you still have mentors? Who are some of those people? What are some of the conversations that you're having with some of those folks who you consider to be mentors?
Well, again, I was very fortunate to, in my early days, grow up within the GE culture, and Jack Welch and I became friends early in my career, and we stayed in touch long after GE until his passing, last year. So I would say number one. Number two was my college coach, football coach. He was a very, very demanding gentleman, but he had a really kind heart, and so I learned a lot from him. One of the gentlemen I learned the most from was I went in and talked to him one day, and he says, he was very, puffy chest, and said, well, you learned a lot from me. And I said, John, I sure have. I've learned about a dozen things not to do. And he got quite upset with me. And I said, well, John, with you, every issue is a nail and you're a hammer. And I've learned that that's not the best way to motivate people, and to, have kind of a team and togetherness and working forward. So yeah, I continue. One of the things that we have quite a chain with our fraternity. Our alumni is amazing. There must be over 100 and some people on our chain, and we share ideas and we talk to one another, and we're still sharing good ideas and how we continue to bond and support one another. So it's been a great experience for me from the time I pledged to become active and throughout my career here.
Eric, let's talk about creativity. If I'm someone who wants to become more creative, and I want to think about how I can tap into that, especially if I'm a collegiate member, even if I'm an alumnus and I'm 30 years old and I'm starting to think about a career change, what are ways I can start to tap into that creativity? What are ways I can start to step out and take some risks? What are there resources that you read? Are there certain videos you watch on YouTube, right? How can I tap into that creativity?
Yeah, I think for me, part of it is, at heart, I'm a numbers guy. And so I've now moved into this very creative business, and I don't necessarily have all the skills that it takes. So what I've done is build a team that kind of supplements me in that area. And I can manage the fiscal and, managerial responsibilities for this business, but just being around it every day, it's really helped me stretch myself as well. And, being able to speak to that. So I think it's just expanding your circle of influence, people that, if you're trying to grow a skill, if you're trying to grow creativity or motivation or sales or whatever it might be, it's always finding those people that are better than you and that can teach you something. And for me, that's been a formula for success.
I love the message in there too, which is you don't have to do it all on your own, right? Many times people think about Steve Jobs, right? These folks who form these companies, and it's almost as if they did everything from the beginning, or Mark Zuckerberg. It's a team of people, right? And finding folks who offset, the challenges that you have, the skills that you might not necessarily possess. So I love that advice. Brad, how do you inspire those around you to tap into their greatness? I think this is one of the most critical aspects of being a leader, is how you can get folks at times to believe in themselves more than they believe in themselves, to see things in them that they don't see in them. And even for your company, to have a vision and to chart a path that they might not even think is possible. They might think is crazy and beyond bold.
They have a system that they can win in. You have a system where they can hit their short-term and their long-term goals. Do little stuff, explain to them that it's amazing to me that how little some of these kids know about money. They don't realize that 80% of the millionaires right now are first generations from low to moderate. The number one of jobs for millionaires is accountant, engineers, and teachers. You don't have to do all these other crazy stuff to take you to the different level. You can be an entrepreneur and still be a school teacher nowadays. Everything's right here. I mean, you got access to people with this thing that you can talk to and communicate. That in my day, we never had that opportunity. Like, Donnie, if I wanted to call you and I had to leave a message, now I can leave you a message on Instagram and you're going to respond back with my answer. And these kids have these at their access. And I want them to be aware that all this stuff is not far off. All it is, it's the long game. And if you're disciplined and you have a plan, you can be successful and no matter what you do. And you can be rich and no matter what you do.
Bob, I want to talk about how you assess and evaluate, especially, again, I love tapping in that you all have different perspectives. What I love, Bob, is when it's just such a large, some of these expansive organizations you run, how you're able to keep your finger on the pulse. How consistently or how constantly are you evaluating whether you need to shift directions? Because you talked about success creates complacency. And I'm sure there can be where if you have a product line or even just the business and how it's operating, how often are you evaluating, do we need to shift course? And that shift could be large. That shift could just be a small turn or a small polish. How often are you having that analysis with either just internally yourself or even with your team, the folks that you sit down and your kitchen cabinet, so to speak?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, my business model, my rhythm is that we used to have our leadership team meet every week. And depending on the business, sometimes it would be 5:30 in the morning because it was a heavy industrial business and we had to make sure that our products were out there working, hauling freight, for example. I strongly believe that you have to, have everyone involved in the success of a business. You have to create that team atmosphere of not only abdication, but it's got to be dedication, right? You have to provide. A lot of people want authority. A smaller group wants responsibility, and damn few want accountability. So it's kind of that inverted pyramid. And so I think it was important to have continuous, frequent discussions with your team. And I think it's inappropriate to wait annually to tell people they screwed up. You ought to seize the moment to reward, recognize, and or to coach. Because it is that spontaneous interface, that spontaneous feedback that's so important. And I just want to build off one thing that Brad said. My philosophy has been, on capital allocation. Brad said it better than I do about, the money thing. But when you invest in capital, you basically start to depreciate it from the day you bolt it down. My philosophy was about investing in human capital. There's double appreciation. I had double entendre. One, the person appreciates the commitment to them, and their value appreciates in the portability of the skills that you invested in them. Really important.
Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you for all of these nuggets of gold that you have left for folks to pick up. Hopefully folks have been taking notes. And the great thing about this is we are memorializing, we are recording this to be able to share with others. I would be remiss if I didn't give all of you a platform, an opportunity to talk to the entire fraternity and just share a message that you want to leave folks with, whether it be about entrepreneurship, whether it be simply about how folks are continuing to navigate the pandemic, and we look like we're getting closer and closer to getting on the other end of that. A message that you want to share with Teak Nation. Obviously, the organization has meant so much to you as it has to me. Can't wait to hear. Brad, why don't you get us started? What are your thoughts? What's a message you'd like to share with Teak Nation?
Well, with everything going on in the world, and it seems like it's where everybody's in a little bit of a rut, it's going to get better. And I think we're on the tail end of it. And if you watch through history, that the people that work at it and pull their bootstraps up and go back to work, they're going to make out and they're going to come out better ahead in the long run. So it's basically up to you if you want to be a victor or a victim. So I'm telling you guys just to go out there and be the victor in this situation and figure out some way to make some money, take you to a different level, put you in a position that you want to be in, that otherwise you may not have been able to take advantage of this situation, because there's going to be opportunity here.
Thank you, Brad. Dave, someone who's unbelievably engaged in the fraternity. As I mentioned at the beginning, member of the foundation board of directors, former council member, deeply involved with your group there at USC, the largest chapter in Teak Nation. I know you probably wouldn't even attend if I didn't make sure I made that plug here. And I see Tommy Trojan there in the background on that helmet. Advice, thoughts for Teak Nation?
Or maybe starting your own business. Start right now, because you're in Teak right now, and Teak really truly is your first entrepreneurial experience. It's a small business. It has all the complexities that any small business would have. You have to manage money. You have to bring in your product with your new members. You have to recruit. You have to operate without screwing up and destroying yourselves. You have to work with other leaders. You have to elect people. You have to put together committees. Teak is the perfect place to learn how to become an entrepreneur. And I can tell you from my own experience, that's how I learned it. I really give credit to Teak for so much in my life, my friends, my business, my skills, my leadership capabilities. Yeah, I may have had an inkling of that before, but it was my experience with this fraternity that's made all the difference. So start now. Don't think it's something you do after college. It's something you can do right now.
Thank you, Dave. Eric, to you, and before we hear your inspiring message, I'm sure, to Teak Nation, I want to thank you personally. Obviously, the listeners out there, the viewers out there don't know, but you live in Houston, Texas, and you have had issues in terms of having water, having heat. I know today might have been the first day, or yesterday, one of the other, we were texting back and forth that you were finally able to take a shower. So yes, to be able to make time to be here while so many things in your personal life are out there and need to be navigated. Thank you so much for doing this for the fraternity and for serving as a member of the Grand Council. Message, thoughts that you have for Teak Nation?
Yeah, so this year has just been, as a business owner, we've all had a lot of challenges thrown at us, whether it's, COVID, whether it's the weather, whether, it just feels like the hits just keep coming. But what I have been so inspired by is actually the chapters and the work that the international fraternity has done this year to stay engaged, to keep your chapters going, to actually build momentum for, as Brad said, it is going to get better. We are going to get past this. And it's the work that we're doing now and the foundation that we're setting that's really going to set, all of our businesses and your chapters up for success, going into the second half of this year, hopefully. So I just encourage everyone to keep the faith and to rely on not only your immediate chapter, but the other chapters around you and all the resources that Teak brings to bear. And, that's another thing that an entrepreneur has to do is learn where they can get support, where they can, get guidance and advice. And I think there's so much opportunity out there for you to take advantage of. And I hope that you all do.
Thank you, Eric.
Hey,
Bob, someone who folks pay money to come in and share advice and share thoughts. And we're extremely grateful that you're willing to make time and do this. Sage thoughts that you have for Tau Kappa Epsilon here.
Sure. Let me just say, everybody out there, you're part of an amazing organization, amazing fraternity. And I think the other gentleman said it extremely well, that brotherhood will not end just because you graduate. I can tell you, I've been out of school since 1971, and my relationship with the fraternity has only gotten stronger as I've met other fathers across the country and have that same kind of bond. Remember, you have an infinite capacity to do anything you want to do that you set your mind to. Number 2 or 3, I would say one of the things that has really guided me over the years is to have this quick market intelligence. In other words, what's the competition doing that I need to be sensitive to? We did it like every weekend in retail. What could go wrong and what can I do to prevent it? Certainly, I think I was on the phone with 100 CEOs. None of us said we would have anticipated a pandemic. I'm sure, Eric, if we talk to all the CEOs down there in Texas, none of them thought your own grid would collapse, right? So I think it's important, extremely important to think about what might happen and how do I prevent it. That's part of that strategic process that you go through with your board or your own group of entrepreneurs. So good luck to all of you out there, and wish you tremendous success.
Panel, man, I want to thank all of you. You all are representatives in fraternity for life. For all those folks we knelt at the altar and we said we're going to be part of the fraternity for life when we took the bond, these are the living examples of it. Folks have not only found success, but they've continued to stay engaged with the fraternity, and now just being so generous and gracious in giving back to the organization. I cannot thank you enough for your time tonight.